roads excusable in the summer. Mark, going to start?
Just a real quick, we usually, again, open the meeting with an opportunity for check-in. I don't know if there's been any items of note that want to be recorded, but I'll open it up for that at the beginning here.
I think people are confused about straw poll, straw vote. How many polling places do we need? Okay, they don't understand that it's not non-binding. So I think that there was a little confusion around that.
Okay, good, and we'll sort of think about the best ways to make it clear the intent of what that is and the requirement from the Department of Education's standpoint for that. We don't want it to become overly complex and burdensome, but we also want it to be an opportunity for the community to weigh in on their feelings about the site. So that's good. Thank you.
And it's only the site,
That's
right?
correct. That's all the straw
At this time.
question is aiming to get, is the desire to move forward with that site. So.
Yeah, and when we were at the DOE a couple weeks, 2 weeks ago, yes, because I did have a citizen ask, will there be a way to electronically vote that evening? And so I asked Scott Brown that, and they said no, that they don't do that because how do they know who's voting? So there isn't record of that vote. The second thing was the intent of what we're doing is the person voting at the poll or weighing in at the poll is to have heard the presentation. It's not just to come and say yes to the site or no. The intent is that you're listening to a presentation. After the presentation, you say yes to what I heard or no to what I heard. And it is non-binding. We listen to the community when we selected the site, so the assumption is it would be approved. If it isn't approved, then we miss something down the road, down the line.
So what happens if it's not approved?
Then the Department of Education would take that under advisement as they either consider what we're doing and moving forward or approving us moving forward with the process. They may say, I think you may have missed something. I think you maybe need to go back and understand where the community is and why there isn't necessarily support for it. But I don't know that it's actually ever happened in the entire time that has been a requirement of the process.
So do we have to have a certain number of people?
Nope.
So the 10 of us could show up and say yes?
You could have two people in the room, and they have to be, again, citizens of that community to vote. But absolutely, there's no minimum number. There's no, and it's a non-binding vote.
It's really just a gauge that we have support from the community as we're moving forward.
How many normally show up?
It varies.
Yeah, the last one we did in Lewiston, we had, I think, somewhere between 50 and 75 show up.
Okay. And we had about 75 in Sanford for the elementary school projects.
75 in Sanford? Wow.
I know from what I've heard, it's been very positive. I really haven't heard
Yes.
anyone say, I think that's a terrible decision. I don't know what other people have felt.
I've told everybody that it's not going to look anything like what it does now.
Right.
It's not.
Exactly.
Nor is it going to be located where
Right.
it is now.
Right.
So.
Yeah.
I've gotten a few, like, where are the kids gonna go while they're building?
Exactly.
And I was like, well, it's going to be a mess for a few years. I mean, it's gonna be tough, but the people that are doing it know what they're doing, and they will stage it appropriately, and when it's done, it'll be great.
Yeah, exactly.
And so when you plan out the fields, somebody said to me, so is that baseball going to land someplace that it shouldn't, in the middle of the lacrosse field or something? So is there enough room so that they can play a regulation game and not break my windows or something?
Absolutely. I mean, if they get it in the Mechanic Savings Bank parking lot, then they deserve the home run. But no, the size of the fields are regulation. So
Yes.
Exactly. That's right. No, what we have just again, those were just shown so that we can understand that we have enough space on the site to accommodate everything. But those were shown as regulation size fields.
where you do see overlap, it's overlap of seasons.
Yeah.
So those two things will not happen at the same time. Just trying to be efficient with the space.
Good. Another kind of couple quick updates, and we're gonna, again, the majority of focus of tonight's meeting is on the review of the ed specs, and that's sort of, as we've been talking about prior to this, the idea that we spent a lot of time looking at site selection, and the importance of the education specifications as we move forward, warranted having some time to really discuss it as a committee. So, but a couple of real quick updates on the last meeting we had with the Department of Education. We shared the update on the site selection, and we shared with them a draft of the ed specs. On the site selection, I think there was not a lot of feedback. They had seen the press coverage of it. They had some feedback that there were some folks that were on the Department of Ed board that were surprised that the announcement was made before it had been approved, if you will, by the Department of Education officially. We recalled that at our previous meeting with them, we were careful to make sure that, is it okay to share this selection with the community? And they said yes. And so we're not quite sure how that signal got sort of crossed, but that was.
Well, I think what's important to say is the building committee has selected the site. The community is endorsing the site, but the DOE has yet to approve it. It could go to the DOE and they say no. But, so we have to use our words that it's not the approved site, it's the building committee selected site. Proposed site, right. So you have, it's the language, and Scott Brown said, I did reread the press release, and you said it was a building committee site selection. But the newspaper, the way the person read the newspaper article, it sounded like it was the site, it had already been approved. So, it's all the way people read things, but, that's why people don't understand. Because the state of Maine is investing the large dollars into this project, they want to be the ones who make the decisions and lead our pathway. It's not a local project, it's a state-funded project.
They're the big daddy or the big mummy, depending on.
That's exactly it, yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So,
The same people that are there now, will they be there when this is done? Is that a position that's?
We don't see much turnover
Yeah.
in the group.
Not
that we're
necessarily,
working with.
because I think they do serve for a term, but I don't know.
So it doesn't change like with the governor or?
I think they have, again, I'm not sure the length of their term, but we've seen the same people on now that have been there for a period of time, several years going back past the previous administration, so.
So this follows that big timeline that
Exactly.
we had,
Correct.
right?
Yep.
Or we still have, right?
We still have.
And we're chunking it off.
Yep, so we're almost there. That gets into kind of the next part of my update, which is the site application. So as we move forward, we'll have the straw poll, and then that'll become part of this process as well. We'll check off that step. We have a site application that we're going to turn into the Department of Ed that is a summary of all the work that you folks have been a part of as we've moved through this whole site selection. That gets formalized in that document that we submit to them. That we expect to be done, our draft is going to be done in about a week. And then that, again, we'll have an opportunity to share that with everyone here. That'll go up to the state. They'll have a chance to review it at the, and provide any feedback that they have to us on that. And then that'll become a formal submission. So that's,
But we do keep in mind, we've kept them in the loop every step of the way, so they know all the bits and pieces that are going into this. It's getting the formal letters from all the agencies and things like that, and getting all the information collected and submitted, so putting that together at this point.
that's kind of where the site application is, but you're right, that's one of those things. So that as we've been moving along, the site selection, the first piece we had was the new versus renovation analysis. The next piece we did was the site selection, then ed specs, which again, we're getting to the point of completing that. And then we're gonna start moving into the programming of the building itself. What are the spaces that we need in the building, and how do we wanna organize those spaces?
We've already started a little bit on that in the background with surveys out to the staff. We're starting to analyze the tours, the floor plans of the tours that we went on, and we have all the existing information collected on the existing programs and buildings, so that's in the works.
So does the state call these ed specs, or is that a name that is conjured up from the
It's a-
architects and us?
Nope, that's a common terminology, and the state recognizes that term for what these are, for the education specifications.
And
And they're common, and when you're designing a building, it's to really understand the ways in which you're delivering education, and then that assists the designers in building a facility that supports the way you're teaching and delivering services.
It's pretty
so
common across states.
it's not to analyze what our policy is for education. Like, it's not to
Correct.
analyze our performance-based learning or traditional, right?
Not to scrutinize how you're teaching. This is to say, here's how we're doing this, and to make sure that that gets translated into the design of a facility.
So we're designing a building that's going to be able to take us 30, 40 years out, right?
Right.
With whatever education policy we deem we should have in our city.
Absolutely. So the idea is to understand where you are now, build in enough flexibility, because we all know that that model will evolve over time, as it has in the past. And so that's very much, and there are questions in here in terms of how do you build in that flexibility to accommodate this. And so that's very much part of what this is. This is really a document to guide the design more than it is a scrutiny of your practices.
So it's a documented design for our building to be preliminary, or now.
Well, the idea is that we can't design just what we think. We really have to base it on where the community or the Auburn School Department is, and how they educate their students. And so that's the intent of it. It's really that this is not something that the architects just dream up what the school design is. The architects really need to make sure they're in alignment with where the school department is.
I think a couple examples of that might be in the ed specs needing to acknowledge and justify the use of a second gym. Is, you know, if you're going to have that, if we as a community want that in the design, the ed spec needs to demonstrate and put in terminology the use of that and why we would need that in order to deliver what we believe the community wants us to deliver as an educational opportunity. That goes right along with drama. It goes along with the fields. It goes along with sciences. You know, how are we to deliver this educational experience to our students, and what are the facilities, what are the walls that are needed or not needed in some cases in order to deliver that? So that's what an ed spec is it's the justification for, you know, where do you put the walls and what do you put in those walls?
And how flexible you can be,
Yeah.
want to be.
One of the things that we're looking at is how do you organize your academic programs with other functions in the building, and so that some of that comes from some of the information that's contained herein. So
There's some confusion out in the community what an ed spec is, and I think that probably a lot of people think that they can analyze or have a feedback on, are we going to be proficiency-based learning, traditional learning, whatever's coming down the road learning, okay?
Yeah.
But that's not what this is for.
and we should probably, as in thinking about that for tomorrow night, there's actually a couple definitions that we actually used in some of our workshops, and we'll pull some of those forward so that people have a clear understanding of really what this is all about.
There's about 3 or 4 we brought forward, I think, a couple building committees ago, so we'll just add those to our presentation for tomorrow. The other thing that's occurred since our last meeting is the subcommittees have gathered. I know that sustainability got together. I don't know if there was any others. I know it's tough in the summertime. I don't know, Tom, if you wanted to give an update.
Actually, wasn't there. I didn't make that meeting.
That's right, you weren't.
I apologize.
It's all right.
You there, Brenda?
Sue, do you want to give an update, or do you want me to?
I'll let you do it.
Okay. Well, we had a small group, as Tom reminded me, he wasn't there. But we went over, the request was to have some samples of buildings that Harriman has done with similar systems that we were looking at. And so we put together a printout showing what those systems are, what the operating, how they're operating, how efficient they are. And then really looked at those items that the committee has selected that are going to be above state funding, so really going to have a local component. Those would be geothermal, photovoltaic panels or PV panels, and full building conditioning. And so we started to put numbers to those so we can start to get a handle on what it might be. We also talked about benchmarking and working with Adam to get the existing operating expenses for the existing building so we can start to tell the story of how we are improving upon the existing building you guys have now. So again, every move that we're making, we're trying to build that story as to how we show that this is a more efficient, healthier building than what there is today. Where we're going in the next meeting is we're going to start to really use LEED as the infrastructure to kind of guide the conversation in regards to sustainability. And we're going to start with site design. So Frank's going to join us for our next sustainability meeting. We're running up against the month of August and having a really tough time getting a meeting. I think we've gone through about 6 or 7 different options. So at this point, my recommendation is that we move it to September. So I'm going to, in the next couple days, put out a couple dates for September to get everybody back together and have Frank come in, and we'll start to go through the credits that LEED has outlined. And now that we all know the potential site, we can start to really wrap our heads around how that might impact the site design moving forward. I think that's pretty much it in a nutshell. I'll get the meeting minutes out before the next meeting so everyone can kind of digest exactly what was talked about. And then I think we sent, I don't know if we sent around the handout, but we had a pretty good handout for the last meeting that we'll send forward to everyone as well.
Just really quickly, what I didn't cover was the Department of Education, and in our meeting there, we had sent up the ed spec to them prior to the meeting. Got a little bit of feedback, not a lot, and so the feedback we got was questions regarding the career tech programs and what programs are going to be incorporated into the new facility, and that seems like that's actually settling down. And I think maybe Katie, they're in the ed specs right now, but I think Katie may be covering some of that, and then a level of review of what the state would participate in terms of funding for spaces and what is most likely not going to be in the state's what will become a local expense. So, and there was nothing in black and white. There were just, again, no written comments back to us, but a few comments shared. So things such as the nature of the classrooms, I think was one, number of classrooms, the use of classrooms for teaching adult ed and or college courses and when those would happen. Trying to think of some of the others, but it was something along those lines, small meeting rooms, aspects like that. But we'll share more of that as we collect more feedback, so they are continuing to review those. So
When they look at our site location selection and they realize that there is no cost to the site,
Doesn't make any difference.
they're not giving us.
it's not like you
an
get
$2
extra
million.
credits for that. No, unfortunately. So they'll again.
Trying to be equitable across the state.
Right.
But they just wanted, I think reiterate, just because you write it here doesn't mean it's paid for by the state. And we said we are well aware of it. We have repeated it on many occasions. When I talk to people, I say, to have an auditorium with 1,000, 1,200 seats is going to fall on us. AstroTurf is going to fall on us. Lights at the football field on us, so they're There are things, geothermal is gonna be a local cost. And they just said, well, we feel we have to say it.
So we listened and
Right.
took notes.
So what we're getting is funding for basic cable.
You-
Yes, that's right.
Exactly, there you
Absolutely right.
go.
That's a great analogy, Peter, so. Yep. So, and, you know, PBS is included in that, so, you know, it's not all bad, so.
You wanna talk about our tennis court thing and our meeting with, Doug?
Back, so, a couple other updates after the DOE meeting. One of the items that they brought up was a little bit of concern regarding the NPS grant, and particularly that covers the area around the track, and that was a funded recreation space that to be held in perpetuity as such. And so the concern was that if it's taken offline for 6 months, that can trigger the need for conversion, finding other land for that purpose. So there's a meeting with the state rep who is now overseeing that, Doug Beck, and he suggested that he may be able to find a waiver for that. We're going back to look at, so he was going to send a letter with options to move forward with that issue on the site. I think what we're looking at also is where we phase the work around the track, and can we do it in such a way that we don't disturb it for more than the 6 months. And so depending on when it falls within the calendar and the seasonal use of the site, then we may be able to find a way of improving it within that 6-month window. So those are kind of a couple things there. Any more to that, Kay, that you can recall on that?
No, that's the big one.
Yeah.
The track. It can be used as a recreational football stadium.
Well, I think the language on the grant is such that you have to provide a level of use that is of a similar value, I think is actually the way that the terminology reads in that. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a track necessarily, but you have to provide a level of recreation to the community that provides it there's an equity issue, but it doesn't have to be the same use. And so, but I think our intent is to try to disturb it. It's going to there'll be a track there, or, but it's the idea that we're not going to disturb it for more than that 6-month window, so we don't have to trigger any issue for a conversion or any other, so.
I mean, it's going to be a challenge. If it has to stay open, that means we have to find a way to allow the community to get on it. So while all this is going around, there's got to be a pathway to get to it so that it's open. And then we were discussing that it would probably be the last thing done in the project. While everything's being, you know, kids are being moved to the new building, that building's coming down, everything's got to be prepped that the minute we go for that section, it's done in 6 months. So there's going to be a lot of logistics around protecting it, keeping it open as long as we can, and then being prepared to shut it down and go the 6 months. Because I asked the question, well, it's not really used in the winter, and he said, you really shouldn't be saying that. I said, okay, sorry.
Ooh.
And he said, because if people want to get on it, it should be open to people to be on it. And I said, okay.
They
So,
expect us to plow it?
what?
They expect us to plow it?
No, but it should be that you can get on there and do what you want to do on there.
So sure.
Snowshoe one.
Right, exactly, yeah, yeah.
So,
Right.
yeah, I thought he was very reasonable in saying, you've got to work as hard as you can to do it in 6 months.
Doug Beck came from here. I mean,
Right,
he
yeah.
was employed by
He
the-
understands, but he said the problem is to try, their department has shrunk so far down. There's only 1 or 2 people working on these big grants in Philadelphia and Washington DC. So he said he already has 10 projects on the list that haven't even gotten a response. So the DOE is saying we can't even start until we have something from them. So we're trying to, what's the least resistant path, which is make the contractor do it in 6 months as best we can.
Right. Absolutely.
You know, because if not, we may have to wait 6 months to hear from them.
What are the boundaries of that?
Yeah, we have a sketch somewhere because they're not a very precise, the way that these have done. They're sort of like magic marker on a site plan, a lot
Doesn't
plan.
exactly follow the track, it kind of.
Right.
You know where the fence is? It's outside the fence is the line.
So the fence should technically be moved back into the parking lot.
Correct. Their line is kind of in the parking lot. Mhm. But, yeah, so.
Kind of good for us.
So we've at least, if he writes the letter to say these are the options, and then, Hiram's gonna have to make commitment that in the contract with the contractor that says 6 months. This is what the plan is. If you go over the 6 months, there might be a penalty or whatever. There is no penalty if we go past the 6 months, but it would put us in jeopardy of grant funds, but we're already in jeopardy of grant funds. We haven't taken care of other things that, we're already on the bad list of these grants because of the tennis, there's city, we all have properties that haven't been kept up with the grant money. So, which Doug knows. I mean, he's worked with us.
Yeah, not at the
Not at the current site, but
Elsewhere in the city.
like Sherwood Heights had the tennis courts, those aren't there.
Is that part
There's
of
the Lake Street Playground,
Yeah.
that's one of them.
So we have several of these grants.
The what? The East Auburn tennis courts, which are not in use. So there are already areas that we did not upkeep.
Because of, that we got grants for.
This grant, this funding source
Okay.
has given grants before, so as Doug pointed out, you have other things in the city. I mean, their ideal would be is that we buy 100 acres, we purchase 100 acres, put all of our recreational stuff from the grant on there and be done with it. But of course, we're not going to do that because we don't have that kind of property. So, and
Kind of money to buy it.
right, and the money, you have, well, the money, the land, and he understands that too.
Right.
He said, but, long range, you should be thinking about how you're going to replace some of these pieces, which he's right. We should have a long-term plan for that. And we said that, we understand. He understands. He understands why it gets away from communities.
So when we build the tennis courts, we're doing, what, 3, 4?
No, 6. 6, yep.
6. So if we built 10, would that help us?
No,
That has to
has
be
nothing
at
to do
those-
with it.
Would have to be at those sites, at East Auburn or Sherwood Heights.
It has to be additional property.
Okay.
Yeah, you can convert right now land that has been developed with the grant, and that you can convert to new areas, but there's a whole evaluation from a cost perspective for the land that you're doing, and also you have to take into account the quality of the activity that you're supporting as well. So, but again, the one thing that we have to worry about from our development is the area around the track. We think we have a strategy to deal with it. We're just waiting again to get the pieces in place so that the DOE buys into our approach to that, and we'll continue to kind of just push in that direction. So that's.
So he's in the loop.
Yeah, exactly. And we're just waiting for, we've sent out a letter to him, a reminder again a few days ago, and we're waiting for a response from him, so. The other item that we also have looked at is Billy Hunter came up with some ideas after, I think, walking the site, I think, and ideas where we might try to incorporate the tennis courts on the site and potentially some other facilities as well. And so Frank has gone back, and so a number of folks went and toured those and looked to see where they might fit. And so Frank is going to go back and take a hard look at how do we orient them and get them so that they might fit on the sloped portion of the site. So
Below where the baseball field and softball field are. So it would be terraced down, and they would not, I had to have a growth mindset because I picture them in a rectangle. And Frank said they can be lined up in single file, so, no, in one line. So he would have to see, how many he could get in a lineup on the surface, and what would it take, because it'd have to be retaining walls, a path down to it. So he's looking at all that.
It'd be like kind of, like if you're looking at the snake trail, it'd be to the right of it?
Exactly,
Right.
to the right.
Correct.
Yes.
Don't need to
Yep.
be handicapped accessible.
That would
Yeah,
be
pot-
cool.
Potentially, if there's spectator areas that we need to consider.
Right, so all that has to be considered. Mhm.
That would be
That would make us unique. I think it
long.
would be cool.
Like,
Windy trail.
Right, exactly.
So it's not out of the question, and we
Yep.
said we'd explore it.
Study right now, looking at those grades and so. Very good, excellent. I think that's, so again, we want to spend a fair amount of time today looking at the ed specs, and we passed around the updated draft. I think everyone now has a copy of that, and we'll sort of turn it over to Katie to guide us through some of the thoughts that went into this, and so we'll kind of take a step back.
And
take
you're
notes.
we're practicing, because we have a big meeting tomorrow with the school board and city council. So part of this is feedback on the presentation and the activity we're going to do, and prep for tomorrow night. Okay? We're going to do some practicing here.
Want us to hold hands too?
Sing Kumbaya.
Peter, I'm making you a facilitator tomorrow, so pay attention. Okay, so first of all, we did do a redraft of what you received earlier. And what we did is looking at the law, if you haven't heard, the proficiency-based diploma law has a revision to it. And really, the big revision is, it used to say you must do the proficiency-based diploma, and now it says you may do the proficiency-based diploma. So what we did is our staff, our teachers are working this summer on the grading guidelines, and the task force had come out with recommendations. So we tried to align what is going to currently occur, which is that there's still proficiency-based, there's still proficiency on learning targets, and there are other course requirements, for example, passing the class. So students will have to pass the class at a 76 or higher, and they must meet the learning targets assigned to that course in order to pass the class. So we're doing a combination, not just solely proficiency on the targets. So trying to align what was determined by a task force. Teachers are working this summer on the guidelines that are going to go out to parents. So we want to align what we're doing in the ed specs. But to your point, Bonnie, these ed specs are to drive the design, which needs to be done before we have referendum in June. Okay? Doesn't mean 3 or 5 years from now, we may be big into something else. It doesn't take away from this, okay? So just so people understand that, what we did is went through and just made sure where we say proficiency, is it necessary? And when we said about the law has changed, so we revamped some of that. So, and what I did do is show you where we striked out and put in italics the new stuff. There isn't a whole lot, but you know, if you just skim through, the opening paragraph had said about the law. I'm getting to it. It's kind of deep in there. So you'll see that we scratched it out, and I'm on number 2 of the narrative. So go all the way to the narrative.
Okay.
Question 1. Page 2 of the narrative. Everybody there? Help your neighbor. See, Peter will be in school. Help your neighbor if they don't.
Good neighbor.
Help your neighbor.
I always have people looking at my papers when I
Did you? Because you had the right answer? Or
Peter, what did Peter write?
you weren't looking at other
There
people's?
yet, I'm going, are you there yet, Peter? Come on,
Right.
I'm looking at it.
Tab 7.
David, are you there?
page 2.
Peter, can you help your friend David?
Of tab 7.
Careful now, be careful.
You said page 2.
Page 2.
Yeah, but
That's 5, that's 3.
page 2, we're 31.
I think you're there now.
Remember what Truman
Right there.
said? Come on.
Okay, so,
It's not highlighted here.
right, so you'll see that first paragraph, Auburn's vision for standards-based, interdisciplinary, learner-centered classrooms is aligned to the state's vision for a system that awards diplomas based on demonstration of proficiency, and then you see what we crossed out, and meeting course requirements. In order for all students to achieve diploma requirements, there must be equitable access to rich, engaging learning experiences aligned to Maine learning results. So that's an example of something that was changed. The other areas that were changed is when the word proficiency was used, we determined, was it necessary to keep the word proficiency, or can we change it to another word like goals, or the learning targets met? So that's really the major changes. Holly had mentioned multicultural, so we added a couple of sentences about multicultural. So you'll look and say, well, there's nothing on these pages. That's right, because proficiency wasn't mentioned.
So these questions.
Yeah, I'm gonna
Okay.
get to, yeah. Okay, that's all right, no, good. So this, to make sure everybody understands, this is required by the state. And so what are educational specifications? The Maine Department of Ed states, and I'm gonna just go over this. This, when you Google Maine DOE Ed specifications, there's a document that has all of these questions in it, all of the things you need to respond, and it opens with what I think the community needs to hear. It expects you to build a 21st century high school. So a lot of what you have already said, and the staff has said, and we've talked about in different forums, is in here for a reason. It has to respond to what the state's hoping for. So you'll see here, goals and objectives of education in the 21st century. It goes on to say this: it expects students are growing in a fast-paced, ever-changing digital age. It notes we're globally interconnected, that they're going to be adults in a more demanding and competitive world, that they need to have experiences both in and out of school, that the education is engaging and relevant, and that they're able to navigate a new borderless world of knowledge, industry, and innovation. This is what the DOE is saying your ed specs need to be responding to. Okay? They also are saying, this isn't in your packet, this is what the opening is of the states. High-performing schools have these characteristics, so they're looking for these characteristics. When they review our ed specs, they're looking, are you following what we know about high-performing schools, which is offer rigorous academics and instill high expectations for all students, that it provides relevant, engaging curricula and teaching practices that incorporate real-world applications, have a common school-wide mission and design, foster healthy, supportive school culture, be organized into small, safe, and personalized learning communities. Personalized is seen a lot in their questions. If you looked at their questions, a lot was, how are you going to be personalizing? Incorporate into the facilities design flexible school structures, practices, spaces, and furnishings that can adapt to emerging needs, and support professional learning partnerships and collaborative leadership. So this is right in the DOE, beginning of the ed specs, that they're saying this is what you should be thinking about when you're writing this. When you read the 8 questions and what they need us to respond to, that's what you're hearing in all of what they're asking us, okay? They also go on to say that we need to tell the designers what we're thinking about with innovative teaching and learning practices. They want to know how you're accommodating for new and emerging technologies and practices. You know how we use that word flexible all the time? That's what we mean when we say flexible. We have to be flexible because we're not sure what's going to be going on. We need to have a quality education that achieves rigorous academic standards. And we must reconsider traditional practices, because you need to have a blueprint that's going to be broader in context as a lifelong learning center. So I think it's really important for people to understand that the Auburn School Department didn't decide what the questions were going to be and what the state was asking. The state has clearly stated, we're investing a lot of money in building a new high school. We have expectations that it's going to be 21st century high school. Questions?
So, to go back to what Bonnie spoke about at the beginning of the meeting, this document does get into teaching philosophy, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
It gets into what is your programming going to look like that answers these questions? Yes.
Yeah.
However, we know it evolves. They're not going to go in our building, 10 years from now and say, you said you were going to do this. Because we've talked to schools we visited. You said integrated, how is that going? Remember when we went to Mount Blue and they had done some things and they said, we're in progress. We're still moving towards the vision. It's a vision of where you are, where you want to be, but it doesn't mean the path can't shift and change. But you have to answer these questions. So when they say flexible, you can't say, well, we don't want any flexible space.
You're not gonna have any strange color combinations for people that are colorblind and can't see.
Right. Exactly. You gotta be,
I remember this guy who wrote me and says, this is a great site, but I can't see a thing on it.
because of the stuff.
I said, what's the problem? He says, I'm colorblind, you can't use these colors.
And then it notes that nationally and around the world, schools are being built that are inviting and stimulating spaces for learners of all ages, that has personalized learning environments, and also there needs to be consideration to build integrated, personalized schools. So moving away from those traditional ways of organizing schools to be more integrated and personalized.
Can they give a better definition of personalized?
I think they mean smaller spaces. They don't get into it. You can read,
Yeah,
I'm highlighting
Yes,
things.
I know you are, but did they further define that personalized? I mean,
Right.
you're bringing that down, is it personalized to a community? Is it, personalized to a
Well, it
building
says
committee? What's
that
a
will
personalized-
maximize the learning experience for all students. So you're making it so that it responds to all students and their needs, like adding the CTE program, adding outdoor learning options.
So is it personalized to the community then? Because that's what we feel the
Okay.
community needs.
Personalized at a student level.
Student level, that's what I see, student level.
To a student level. If you read the document, that's the sense
A lot of the
that I got.
questions.
Yeah.
A lot of the questions ask, how are you going to make education more personalized?
Well, each student has one of those PE, what do they call it?
IEPs?
IEP. And so you must have examples of those, so.
And that's whatever we're doing is in here. The DOE says one course is integrated. Do you plan to do more? And we said, well, our staff there are probably 50% of our staff is really excited about the possibilities of integration, and then 50% of the staff are still very departmentalized. So we want it to be organic. Those teachers who want to build those integrated courses, we want them to take those risks and flourish, while still honoring those teachers that are still working in the departments and doing good work there. So, and they heard that. I said, for me to say we're all going to be integrated wouldn't be fair to the process. So that's why you'll read in the ed specs, we want to do more of it, but it's going to be a process.
Yeah, it'll take time.
It's going to take time.
And that's where the flexibility comes in.
And that's why that word flexible is throughout the document. So to have people understand that, we didn't do this in an office up on the 4th floor. Right? This had a lot of input from people. You saw the list in your document of all that participated in workshops. And if you look at that list, there's teachers, administrators. There was a meeting where parents were invited. 2 parents sat on that had reached out. And then Becky Conrad was there for a morning. So people who tried to pop in did so. And so these were the meetings that took place. There were also many meetings around the Vision 2020 updated to Vision 2030. So we collected feedback, was collected at those meetings. There were other meetings that were facilitated with staff. That was all that material was collected. We had the community forum that was held on March 21st. So there were 2 community forums last year, one in August and one in March. And all those notes went to David Stevens, who we contracted with. He took all the notes and he's drafted a new vision update That has not gone to anyone but myself. It will be going to our administrative retreat next week. Then it will be going out to the staff over workshop days. We've got to plan it. Then it will be going out to the community, probably in different forums like the PTOs. Then it's going to go to the school committee and then look for approval. There isn't a huge shift in it because it wasn't meant for a major rewrite. The protocol was look at what you still see as work to be done, what wording, and Brandy, you probably remember this, you know, what wording did you want kind of shifted and changed up? For example, right now it says a world yet imagined. People wanted that changed a little bit because that's out there, and so right now it says to succeed in a world that changes at a fast rate, something with fast in it, that it's ever moving, and we have to have students ready to respond to that. So that were some suggestions that David listened to what everybody was saying about making it smaller, more tangible, and taking it and making some adjustments to it. So that has not gone out. It won't go out until August, September, because staff, I got it in June, staff were leaving, administrators haven't seen it, so that works still. But we took all of that to influence, because as you see in the packet, Vision 2020 is in there, right? So it took those meetings, the vision meetings, and then your school tours. So every time we went on a tour and people were excited, this is what we want, Harriman would read through the specs and say, okay, you all talked a lot about this, we need more on this. You know, so if you want the 2 gyms, we're not seeing enough to support 2 gyms, so beef those up. When each section was written by staff, we wrote 2 mornings. Staff were assigned to questions and drafted. They read it out loud and then put them against our guiding principles. So we said these were our guiding principles. They read the section and they said, do we answer the guiding principles? Do we have things that we said we wanted? Are they outlined in that? Are we answering the questions the way they're intended? So there was a review. Then when all that was done and all the drafts were started, Shelley Mogul and Heidi McCurdy finished them to make sure everything was in there that needed to be in there and finalized the draft. So these have been the guiding principles. These are in the packet, which is, and listen to these things. These things are very outlined in the questions. They're outlined in the state expectations, real world connections and relevance.
Katie, I think you've answered this, but I want to clarify it.
Mm-hmm.
So this document that is before us, is this subject to change going forward? And,
You mean as it is this moment?
right, and how long does that period of time last? Do you know what I'm asking?
Yes. So the intent of this is to tonight get feedback,
Yeah,
tomorrow night get feedback,
right,
redraft,
yeah,
bring it to school committee on August 22nd for a first reading.
right,
Then they will adopt, or I think they just have to give it a approval on the first meeting in September, because they have to go in the site packet. In order for Harriman to start designing, they have to have this approved by school committee and in the DOE's hands so that they understand what they are designing.
okay.
So the longer we wait on it, the longer it delays.
So that school committee meeting is the end of August, is that right?
For the first reading,
For
and
the
then
fir-
beginning of September, the goal is to have them approved.
Okay,
In terms of the relevance of
that
the
make sense?
information, I think the intent of this is that this captures where you are right now
Right.
with your current thinking. And
Yeah.
it may change in a year or 2 years, but that's the best knowledge we have to build upon to design the new school.
Because remember, the programming, the community is going to vote on the programming in June. The
Right.
design in June. So once that approval goes and it's being designed, if Auburn was to change something, you're not going to go to Harriman and say, you know that science, well now, could you change that science room? Well, no. See what I'm saying? It's the building, it's not, you know, when you asked about, it makes me think of when you build a home. right? You're gonna sit with the architect, and you're gonna say, this is how my family works. We want the kitchen here, but it's not telling the family how to set the table and make the meal. It's setting the design for what the family hopes to be doing, but the family might change, but the kitchen is still where it is in the dining room, but we may reset it up in a different way. Does that make sense?
Not necessarily. My wife and I built 2 homes,
Oh dear,
and things change.
that's right.
Again, about the kitchen and the family and the philosophy and whatever.
Well, the family meets the architect, they build the house, right? But they're not telling the family how to use the space based on the initial meeting or the initial design. They're not telling them how to set the table when they have their meals. You ask for a kitchen, we're building the kitchen. But they might decide that becomes a den later. But that space is the space, but I might put new furniture in it. I might rearrange how it's set up. That's not,
It's the walls.
it's the
Yeah, I was
walls.
just gonna say,
Walls.
the
Come back.
movable
You're-
walls. that
Right,
we
that's
have.
why we wanted flexible spaces.
Right.
Correct.
I liked those were
Right.
cool.
Us having a proficiency-based diploma or an ABC grading system has absolutely nothing to do with the walls.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
Okay?
Got it? Not really.
Yes and no.
Right.
There might be 3 state laws that happen 3 years from now that we're going to have to make adjustments.
I think part of the challenge is going to be, and I said this at the last meeting, the compressed time frame
Yeah.
for the school committee to make a decision. Can you go back several slides to the keep going, keep going, keep going? That one. Whoop,
Come forward.
go forward to
One, no, next one.
2.
And there's 1, 2, 3,
That one.
That one.
this one.
That one right there.
Yeah.
So, looking at that, it would indicate to me that the ed specifications have to do with the academics, right? The teaching practices, the curricula. I mean, it states it right there. So, I just want to make
That's why we
sure
have-
that people are comfortable
Is that language taken
with
verbatim?
the process.
Verbatim.
Because in some ways, I can understand that, I mean, it says school facility should offer rigorous academics. Well, the school facility isn't what offers high or rigorous academics. The people inside.
It is, but reading that, if you read it literally, which I did on the first draft, it would indicate that it has to do with curriculum.
Correct.
And it has to do with more than just the walls, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Well, because the curriculum is the argument for the space. You'd have to give me an example of what's in here, what's missing, and what's in here that wouldn't be supported.
Well, I think and I don't want this all to be about proficiency-based learning, okay?
Right.
Because that's important because of the discussions that have taken place.
Right.
But to me, the more important thing is making sure that people have the opportunity to have a say and that their thoughts, their concerns, their comments are listened to. And the concern that I have is, and I'm not being critical, I'm expressing a concern. Whenever you give people a compressed time frame, particularly in the public sector, people feel like they're being squeezed and they're not
Right.
being given the opportunity that they'd like to have to express their opinion.
Right.
That,
Yeah.
and I know you understand that.
Right, and the challenge is the staff, the educators put the ed specs together,
Right.
right? With input at the community forum. That a lot of it was taken from that. So I guess I would have to hear, which I think the school committee will on August 22nd, what in here, and that's why we're going to have an activity, what in here would raise red flags? We try to limit, proficiency-based learning is nowhere in this document. The word,
You've taken it out of the second
it,
draft.
it was never in there. The word proficiency was there, and the proficiency-based diploma was there in 3 places. Other than that, it was not, you can see the pages we did not touch.
Yeah, there's a,
There's a perception.
Katie,
there's
I
a
don't
per-
want to get in a debate with you.
It's a
'cause
political
I
perception.
respect you. It's
Yeah.
there's a strong inference,
Yes,
okay?
that we
And-
support proficiency,
Right.
yes.
But again, that's not my only point, so,
No,
yeah.
So in the
Peter,
process,
everything you're saying, we're well aware of that, but how we cannot as a community accept the word proficiency. But if the community says we don't want the word proficiency in here, it won't make a difference on what the building looks like. So if the community says every time we do not want the word proficiency in there, then it's not in there. It's not a big deal.
so in the process, if the public's gonna be present,
Mm-hmm.
public, either city council or whatever, and they're being presented this, are you inviting input? You're gonna accept input, have them put their mark on it, or so to speak, ownership? Or is it just going to be a time to say, well, this is what it is, we're informing you, but we really don't care what you have to say? No, I don't want to be argumentative. I just want to just raise a question, what's expected?
No, the expectation for tonight and tomorrow night is to get feedback. It will be up to the school committee whether the draft that's redrafted is accepted.
Okay.
Right, so next year at Edward Little High School, proficiency is still in place. That's a fact. So that's what?
Bit of loss by these, you can go back to that other slide, these sound bites of 2 or 3 words. How does that tell the architect how to design the space?
What sound bites?
These,
No, it's just the highlighted.
italicized.
Those,
Well, you'd have to, I didn't read it. I can read it out loud to you.
well, I don't know if reading out loud will make it better. It's those 10 items.
These right
10
here?
items. No.
No, go back.
These?
Before you
further
went,
Or do you
down.
mean
Guiding
that, do you mean this?
yeah.
Hey,
How's that?
no, this whole document is informing.
Oh, okay.
Okay, these are the guiding principles
Guiding principles.
What?
Of the high school.
of this
the high school.
document. The guiding principles of what we want to see happening for our students at the high school is that they have opportunity to have real-world connections and relevance. They have an opportunity for interdisciplinary instruction. They have opportunity for project-based learning, not PBLS and proficiency-based learning, but project-based learning. Pathways that represent science, technology, engineering, arts, math, that they have opportunity to be college and career ready, that the facility has opportunity for community resource to be part of the community and the community be part of it, that it's flexible and adaptable, that there's a sense of identity, pride, and ownership within the facility, that the facility celebrates learning, and that the facility has an outdoor connections.
I think,
So these are 10 points, but it doesn't mean anything to me. I mean, if I was an architect, I wouldn't know how.
Well, yeah, actually,
kind of room I would build.
what we did was, inside of this, we actually have a matrix. And what it does is it has these guiding principles and rows. And then in columns, we actually have some of the things that the architects are gonna think of as they're designing the building. And it puts a little dot where they intersect. So here's where we can address these guiding principles. So,
Patterns, so it's aligning those design patterns with guiding principles. So we start to link the principle with a actual physical architectural experience.
Do you see that page, David?
yeah,
Okay.
exactly. And so that starts to build that bridge between.
And I can add that to this slide to
And
make it clear.
This whole page
I would
is
do
kind
that.
of the steps that we took. So we worked with the groups to start the draft of the design statement. So there were several statements that had come up with.
That's
the-
just a title.
What's
We have a
that?
That's just a title, title point,
The guiding principles?
yeah.
There's an interface that's, I guess, trying to be established is between, I'll call it the educators and the community, and the designers. The designers are going to deal with the physical, the walls. And I think that's reasonably descriptive, is where is the wall going to be, how tall is it going to be, where is it going to bend, what can you do within that wall that they're going to put there. But the community and educators talk about what happens inside that space, so that because that's what they understand. Here's what I want to happen. I want to be able to have real-world connections and relevance. Well, that doesn't really mean anything to the wall itself, as you describe it to you, David. What does that mean for where that wall goes? But it does mean something to a designer, because they have to understand that concept and decide, how do they make that wall, and where do they make it, and how big, how far away from the other wall is it? You know, how do they ventilate it, and that type of thing. So there's, I don't want to call it a disconnect, but there is this interface that needs to take place between what you're saying and what we're trying to put down on paper and what a designer has to interpret it as in order to make it into a real building. And so the use of terms, interdisciplinary instruction, you know, where they intersect here, how does a design address that? Would not be necessarily something that you would think of when you talk about interdisciplinary design.
We have actually the Department of or the Maine State Board of Education, their definition of what an ed spec is, which I think is a little more succinct in describing what this document is trying to do. So Lisa's just going to read this.
So this is from our May meeting of the building committee. And so the definition is, educational specifications are the means by which a school administrative unit describes its educational goals and activities, and the interrelationships between those educational goals and activities and their associated spaces that need to be provided in a proposed new or renovated school facility.
It's the walls.
It's taking those goals, the spaces, and this document is trying to capture the link between those, so it starts to give us the recipe to design this building.
Somebody would need to know a little bit more about what those 10 points to understand it. And it's in here, so.
Yeah, I think in some ways we talked about maybe even putting a little glossary of those terms as part of this, and so that way it is clear what we're talking about when you see the term. What does project-based learning mean? What do pathways, learning pathways, or curriculum pathways mean? What do we mean when we say that it's an interdisciplinary instruction? So.
I think you want to phrase that, what does it mean to you as a designer? Not what does it mean to the academic? Because
well, I don't know. Hopefully it's not too different.
Right.
They really should be one and the same. I'm not going to define what interdisciplinary instruction is. That's to the educators. I think we're on the same page there. And so,
Right.
but if I'm designing this school, I'm responding to the behavior inside of that building, and that behavior says we're going to teach together on, in sort of looking at how our content relates to from one area to another.
To
and how we
another.
can teach that together. I need to know that so I can say, okay, do we put this discipline next to this discipline? Do we provide spaces for the students to get together and work? Do we provide a common project lab space? So that's an important aspect of understanding what you're going to do in the building, and then translates into where we put those walls.
that's right, where do you put the walls?
Or not.
Or not, or make them movable, or whatever. But
Open
it's how do you address the expressed desires in a building, physically, in order to accomplish those goals.
What we understand as designers is that the way that you teach is so whether there's a word, highly charged word like proficiency, or another terminology to it, that the learning environment has to be somewhat flexible enough to accommodate that, as well as a variety of learning styles. And all throughout this document really talks to the idea that the teaching and learning process has got to accommodate a variety of modalities. And so,
Right, so can we keep moving, David?
Yes.
Only because you're going to get time, we need your feedback. Okay, so some of the definitions that are the hot topics I had here was Maine Learning Results Standards. So when you read those Maine Learning Results Standards, those are statements defining what students will know and be able to do. Learning targets is in the document, and learning targets are statements aligned to the Maine Learning Results Standards that define Auburn's curriculum pre-K to 12. The targets state what students are expected to learn, how they will demonstrate their learning, and the connections between what was learned and what will be learned. And proficiency means when students have met the expectations of the learning targets aligned to the Maine learning results. So that's just so people understand, we're not talking about the proficiency-based diploma. This is our curriculum. So when we talk about the Maine learning results or learning targets or proficiency, it's around the curriculum. So that's just to clarify. So we're gonna work for a little bit as a group, and I have chart papers and pens. Probably can be in 2 groups because we're a little group tonight. And you're gonna get 3 pieces of paper and assign somebody to be your writer for you. And on one piece of paper is what stood out as positive in these ed specs. So one chart will be labeled positive. What stood out as needing clarification. So I'm wondering what this meant. Like you said, David, I'm wondering what guiding principles meant. I'd like to see more of a definition. Or I read this section in question 3, response number 2. I didn't really know what you meant, what you said there. Okay, that's clarification. Or what stood out as missing. Like Holly said at the last meeting, multicultural, I felt was missing. So we added stuff in on that. So 3 areas. What was positive? Doesn't have to be everything, but you know, your group can talk about what was really positive, what was a little still confusing that we'd like more clarification on, and then what stood out as missing. And you're gonna have probably 10 minutes, not 15 minutes because we're running out of time, but 10 minutes to chart it because then we're gonna look at them. Okay? So, get into 2 groups.
Are you and Tom doing it too?
Tom can do it with you, so it'll be 4 and 4.
Okay.
So group of 4, 4 and 4.
I should have to sneak off to work.
You, what?
I have to sneak off to work.
You have to sneak on.
Yes.
Okay. So you can send me feedback.
Yeah,
though.
I'll
Okay,
take
so send anything that goes to those questions. So now we're down to, Billy, did you get a chance to read them? Okay. So you're going to be in group of 3 and a group of 4. Go. And I'll get you a chart paper.
I read some of the old one at home, not the whole thing.
I thought it was.
Have a nice rest of your summer. Yeah.
I already gave my feedback.
You did, you're right, David. I don't think.
I don't,
I'm not sure the council will be.
I'm not afraid to admit when I'm lost. There's nothing against this. I've read it.
Good point. That's a good point.
I can answer
But I think it's clarity on
So,
ideas and what it's designed to achieve, on what an ed spec is.
are they gonna do?
I don't know.
That confusion, looking at it and saying, this is what's gonna happen, defines exactly what's gonna happen in the classroom.
Sorry, let's put the-
It's a
the-
marketing
Where's the mayor?
Yeah.
book. And it
I'm not
shows the
sure what
swing.
approach he's going to take.
And it says, as the customer wanted it. And it says,
Oh, yeah.
and as the engineering
Designed it, yeah.
and
Doesn't want it.
as it was manufactured, and one is, it's a, trunk is cut out, and it's, instead of the trunk.
I've seen it, yeah.
It's,
Oh, yeah, it's right. I mean, the progression.
Flair for doing it.
What the customer wanted, what the designer designed, and what the manufacturer produced.
I just don't want us going down that road.
Yeah, that's right. I think the clarity, if we can develop clarity on what an ed spec is first, so that it's clear in what its intent and where it's going. What was that doing?
It's very important for the,
It's probably more important than mine.
developer, not the developer, the architect, to know what's gonna go on in there.
That's right, that's all. What do you need for space?
Well, I thought that the discussion that we had.
Water, gas, it's gonna need.
I think more that as well as, do the rooms have permanent walls between them? Or are they removable? Are they, in the science, how big is the science room? And do you have a lab space and a classroom space? Those are costs, those are design components that need to be addressed in your ed spec, because if you specify it here and the state accepts it, then the state is pretty much gonna fund it. If you put them in here and the state says, no, we don't, then the state's not gonna fund it. This one.
Is it proficiency-based learning that we're dealing with tomorrow?
Yeah, we wanna,
And that's not the issue.
no, it's not the issue at all.
Well, it's, what has been presented to us, though, actually counters that argument because of the information that has been presented.
Looking at that one that has this thing,
Teaching principles and curricula and so forth, that would lead you to believe that this does have to do with philosophies like proficiency-based learning.
yeah, people that didn't go on.
It
the
leads you to
course
believe
don't
It's
know
not
what that
just
is.
about
To do with learning.
Right, it's not just about the walls. It's about what happens inside the wall.
Yeah, but the ed spec is not
I don't know what reading and
about what
gatekeeping.
happens inside the walls. The ed spec is what drives the walls, and that's the distinction.
But
The
you-
ed spec-
then you're going right back to what he's not trying to get out of his head. So
No,
but first of all, no matter if we say we're going to do traditional, the traditional
Process with
industrial
Doesn't make any
identity
difference.
and ownership.
we're still gonna do these things. And the students are still going to have to show proficiency or, here's another one, proficiency in the targets
I mean, I
that
know
the
what-
state has set, right?
Success.
Success.
Whatever
so-
term you want.
Right,
Success.
success, right.
C or D or
Mastery,
whatever is
mastery.
passing.
Mastery, right. So no matter what happens to whether it's proficiency or traditional industrial age, it's going to, that is going to drive
Yeah,
the walls.
I don't know what it means to me, so I don't know.
no, that's not what's driving.
That's that, so.
What's driving the walls is the need to educate. How are you gonna educate? Teachers, to me, it's gonna, the teacher's gonna collaborate, and therefore they're gonna be able to have classrooms that can be combined, so I need larger space. Do I need 2 gyms? Do I need a larger auditorium?
So what's driving that? What's,
Right? The ed spec's driving that, and the community's driving it. What do we want?
It's almost like you need 2 discussions here.
You do.
One discussion on, because we didn't talk about Performing Arts Center, we didn't talk about a student restaurant. we
But
didn't
that's-
talk- And that's in here.
That's in here.
We didn't talk about those things
because we
during
got
the
hung up
last,
on
during the last
proficiency.
hour. And tomorrow night, I think the same thing's gonna happen that happened tonight, that people are going to
Gravitate towards that one point.
proficiency-based
Right.
learning.
And that's,
Because the ed specs do ask for that information from the state. The state
the
asks
state
for
asked
that
for it.
information.
How are you going to address this? Yes.
So,
And we could have said, we're going back, seeing that the state is no longer doing proficiency-based diploma, we're going back to traditional learning. And that's what's gonna drive us. We could have said that.
Could have said that, but to me, it's the educational point where what happens to this ed spec? What does it do?
Only better.
What's its result? What is the result of this ed spec?
well, from Katie's answer to my question
We
earlier,
went to the schools, like the
the
school,
impression is that the ed specs
the gathering spaces.
They are to who?
to this process.
To who are they important?
According to the state,
State,
it justifies
to the
which,
community,
They are
justifies.
important to the state.
to the community, to the students, to the
Who
teachers.
are they first important to? The designers. They're really only important to the designers.
I appreciate what you're saying, Tom, but it's more than,
You do know that other communities haven't asked for feedback. They do their ed specs, they do a presentation on it, and it's voted on.
But that's probably before proficiency-based learning became such a hot button.
Maybe. I'm just saying it's not meant to, it's,
Yeah.
We can't get over the fact that it has a lot of proficiencies in it. It has a lot of words that say proficient, proficient, okay? And that rings a nasty bell.
I don't object to that terminology. If a person's taking a course, you expect them to be proficient,
Be proficient, master.
learn
So
something.
will you say that tomorrow night if it comes up?
Yes,
Okay.
Yeah,
it's gonna be measured in some
But
way, A,
Peter,
B, C, or
they're
D.
not, the expectation from the DOE is not that students gave feedback to this, that parents gave feedback to it, that
Right.
it went to a forum, that, it doesn't, that's not the expectation. The educators were to write ed specs
Yeah.
that, based on feedback. This is not a document for the community. I'm sorry, and it's gonna be seen as we're not listening. That is not true.
Not listening about what?
I don't even know. I read these and I think, I'm reading these going, I don't see what the argument would be.
Katie, the second draft,
Yes.
okay? There have been changes made in the second draft where there have been sentences or words that have been deleted.
Correct.
And most of those have to do with, from my quick look at this, have to do with the terminology proficiency-based learning or the
Right.
inference of proficiency-based learning, right?
Yes.
And that was done because of concerns about proficiency-based learning in the
Yeah.
community, right?
Correct. Yep.
So it's natural that people are going to be concerned
About what?
about the ed specifications. And obviously, someone was, because those edits have been made, those changes.
Yeah, the mayor was concerned.
But not just the mayor, it's more than,
No, the mayor read these.
more
and
than
was
the mayor,
cons-
though.
Who else has read these that had concern?
I'm saying from the community, from what I heard, just from the meetings that I was at, city council meetings where people came in and spoke. I don't want to get into
You
a
mean in
long
March?
discussion.
You mean way back in March?
Well,
I was here for that
even
meeting.
more recent than that, during the budget process.
Yeah, April.
Right.
But, no, what I'm saying is, has that group of parents read this and said, we don't like the ed specs? I don't know that.
Well, if they haven't been provided it, they haven't read it.
Right,
Right.
right. And I guess the building committee would have to decide, are we having the community write the ed specs when the educators have written it?
No.
So, I'm just saying, is that what the building committee would?
No.
This is a deciding group, right? This group has to say, what level of input is the community gonna have on the ed specs? It's not my decision, it's the building committee's decision. This was written in the way that every other district has done it, which is we get the educators together, we had a community forum.
Right.
We got all the feedback, and then they were written by the educators. If the community is now gonna read it and say, I don't like interdisciplinary, I don't want flexible classrooms thing, and I go back to the teachers and say, you know how you said you wanted to do project-based learning? Community doesn't want you doing project-based learning. Community doesn't want interdisciplinary. The community doesn't want you to hold kids proficient. So we've just undermined the work that the educators are doing.
But, and once again, that's what they do and not what I do.
That's
So
right.
she knows what she wants, I don't know.
Right.
Is project-based learning like independent study?
No.
No.
Do you want to explain,
Yeah, and I do it here and there. It's like pockets in my class, and as does almost all teachers. But it's not like the reigning way that we teach. It's just a way to help them dig deeper into a concept or an idea. So Erin Towns is great for doing this. She does lots of little. Students get really passionate about one particular topic, and then they just are pushed to go and explore and dive into it, and which makes great sense for her class. Not always for my class, but there's opportunities for that here and there. So it really is dependent on the educator that's involved.
So it's not a different course?
No, it's just to get deeper into the content, and it really engages students.
It's a
when
tool.
when it's appropriate, yeah.
So the idea that you could take an abstract concept, and when you actually have a project based on that you're actually involved in doing something with that concept, that then you start to understand the concept in a greater level of.
Different approach, and the scoring is different, and, right, it's not 0 to 100.
No,
So
that
that's
has nothing to
where-
do with it.
Yeah.
No,
No.
it's just more about getting the students engaged, and the project could be, so for me, projects would be like a week or a week and a half that may do an experiment at home, so that's something that I'm having students do. Erin may have hers for a whole semester, where they're going out into the community and working with people, and that's their
So it has
project.
nothing to do with the grade?
No, so it could be several grades. Mine is usually several grades, doing the taking the data, graphing the data, expressing the data, things of that nature.
I guess what I would say is, my job as city manager is not to be the superintendent of schools, first of all. I would love to see a new high school that is one of the best high schools in the state, and that people love the high school, parents want to send their children there, want to send their children to that school because it's one of the best, and that people are moving here because of the high school. But my concern as city manager is the process more than anything, trying to make sure that the process is one that people are comfortable with, the council is comfortable, the council has the opportunity. I appreciate the workshop that's being held tomorrow night. It gives the council an opportunity to hear about the process that we went through to get to the decision on the location, and then to talk about the next steps. And as part of that will be this discussion on education specifications, so.
So how do we frame it? So this is good feedback and prep for tomorrow night.
Yeah.
This isn't about how the Auburn School Department runs.
Philosophy of the Auburn School Department.
Right. It's taking the Vision 2020.
Yeah.
It's taking the input from the educators. It's taking the feedback, and then we created the ed specification. This is not Vision 2020. This is not the curriculum for the school department. This is not the grading practices of the school department. This is not Marzano's teaching framework, is not in the ed specs. It's about innovation, practices that are research-based, that we know supports what you're just saying,
Right.
Peter. When you went on the tours, did you see something that, see, to me, that, and no,
So did I see something that inspired me or excited me?
Right.
Sure.
right.
Yeah.
So it's not, what about proficiency
Yeah.
would be a barrier to the design of the school?
I think one thing that would help,
Yeah, so give feedback, because I gotta reframe this.
well, I think, this is my own thinking, not as counselor. I think one thing that would help with the workshop
Yeah,
and with the community would be to say that in terms of the discussion and the debate about, I'll say it, proficiency-based learning, that's not what this is about, the
Right.
specifications. That's in another venue, another form. That's why I asked the question that I did about the process on the ed specifications and the timeline, and when the school committee makes a decision, and can that be changed? Is that subject to change?
yeah,
The school committee decides what with the superintendent and your team and teachers, what the teaching philosophy is going to be. The focus is really on, do we want a performing arts center? Do we want student restaurant? Do we want some of the other things that we've seen when we've gone to visit high schools? more about the facility.
So maybe not digging into this.
Well, I'm just,
More about,
but
no, but I hear what you're saying, more about the design.
But some of, some of these things make me think of the buildings we saw.
Good.
Now, I was gonna show, maybe David, this would be, I haven't shown the tours from the Maine schools. Would it help to see pictures of the schools in
Could be,
relation to this?
but we don't need to get sidetracked on activities. We need to, okay, if you're kind of backing up.
Yeah.
You might want to have these activities as far as things, but you got to meet the wordings to support the activities of what
Okay.
you're going
Right.
to have,
Right.
right?
Okay, so list the things, all right, so let's make a
So you
list.
got to back up.
Yeah, I see what you're
This
saying.
is where you want to be, so how
Right.
you back up to
Yeah.
get there?
Okay,
And it has to be in those kind of words.
Okay.
You can't go to the Department of Education and say, we want performing arts as, and this, and this, and a swimming pool, and this, but you gotta write it, and this is your education philosophy or something that's saying, that's why you have to have it.
okay.
It's the ed spec that says why you have to have
So
it.
that makes good, all right, that's so helpful. This is really, really helpful. So start with the items that we would like to see in our high school and how the ed specs have to
Then
support
back,
them.
yeah, and back.
Okay, all right, yep.
Now, if
So-
you don't, the city council doesn't support those kind of things, then you're
Then
not
we
gonna
have to
get.
talk that through.
talk that through.
Okay, so let's talk about those items. We have the performing arts, right? We have the turf fields. What else did you see in the ed specs?
The labs, the science.
Science
Science
labs.
labs.
Labs,
The science labs.
The spaces where the students can have little nooks and crannies that we saw, that they could
Oh,
collaborate.
so the flexible spaces for learning.
Right, either with a teacher or with a
Yeah.
group of students.
Okay.
You know, make it so the kids aren't in such a hurry to leave. You know, like when the bell had rung and they were still all hanging out. They were, you know, it was nice.
place to be.
So
Right.
therefore, the kids didn't want to learn because there were the Google steps. There was a cafeteria. There
So
was
it's like a home
gym-
away from home type of thing,
Right,
you know,
right,
they,
Right.
Right.
okay.
The welcoming space.
Highly engaging,
That you want them to want to be there.
You want the community to also come
Yeah,
at the end of the
definitely.
day and
that,
be
that,
there.
the community connection.
Yep.
is central air a eligible project for state funding?
Oh, so, and
100%.
that's an aspect in here, so that was kind of woven in.
That would be
That's another
that
one,
would
the
be another-
HVAC, yeah,
Yeah, geothermal is gonna be.
geothermal,
yeah.
Yeah.
well, PBC,
The PVC pipes.
Photovoltaic.
Photovoltaic.
Photo, no, see,
photo,
voltaic.
voltaic.
We want to do a
Send me
lead.
pictures of geo and voltaic.
See, a lot of what,
Sometimes too,
What
It's right-
else
it's
did
right
you
here.
see in there
Here
that
it is.
was important?
yeah, the second gym.
Second gym,
Actually,
Going.
the second auditorium, the small auditorium
Yeah,
in
black-
blue.
the black box.
Black room and the dressing room.
so like and the media
Sound
stuff,
And the media stuff.
yeah.
media stuff was nice.
The other,
Also the
Space,
stage workshop.
the black room, the
Black room.
additional theater staging,
Katie,
yes,
going back to your analogy about building a house.
yeah,
When my wife and I built our houses, we
Yeah.
didn't just say, okay, we want to have a patio and we want to have, a family room without knowing what the costs are
Right.
before the house got
exactly.
built.
Yes,
We're not going to know the costs
until it's designed.
Those designs.
this design. So how can we have ed specs that say we want to have a performing arts center, we want to have X, Y, Z without knowing what the costs are to doing
Because
it?
you got to design it, and then you can determine the cost.
Oh, my goodness.
Lisa?
You want to start with all those items.
Yeah.
In the pot, and then we'll
The
put it all
CTE,
together
I've got
and
it.
decide what are the highest priorities.
Priorities, exactly.
When does that happen?
That's what we'll do, as soon as these are approved,
The public gets to vote on.
Right, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Be prepared to answer that question.
Okay, so let me read what I have.
Well,
And,
tell me how you're going to do this.
no, I think David's right, is the building committee, the work that's been done with the Vision 2020 and all that, determine these items that will be part of the design, because we have to put all of it in, and then we'll have to look at the affordability, which we can say.
Right.
And then these ed specs were built to support these items.
Yeah, that's what you'll have to do. You'll have to back into
Right.
it.
And I'm gonna back into
Which
it,
is
okay.
exactly what happened.
A makerspace,
What
I
happens
think
in
is
real
there in
life.
there.
Yes, what happened?
Yeah, I did see that somewhere.
Makerspace, displaying student work for
Oh,
that
yeah.
celebration,
Yeah, we like
right?
Celebration, right.
Displaying, student work. All right, so I have performing arts, 1,200 seats, I think they're at, right? Or are they at 1,000?
God,
1,000 was,
Throwing around 1,000, but
yeah, I thought it
1,200
was,
if
I
we're looking for
thought
the
it
whole
was
student body.
Okay. Turf fields, science labs, flexible space for learning, whole group, so I'll use whole group, direct instruction, small group, collaboration space, what?
Central air.
And I'm getting there.
Climate control.
Engaging spaces
Climate
where
control.
students want to stay to learn.
CTE.
Yeah, community connections such as restaurant, box office.
The weight room, not weight room, but.
Oh, yeah, the athletic,
Training.
wellness,
Yeah.
I'll put wellness center. Wellness
Alternative.
center,
Alternative education.
HVAC, that's not in there right now.
Yeah.
HVAC, geothermal, photovoltaic, second gym, media space, additional theater space, like a smaller stage, a smaller performance area, sound systems, CTE, displaying students' work, maker space, also the interconnectivity of the spaces so that you could film in a classroom and be showing something else, so the building being interconnected.
We had lights for the athletic fields too.
Yeah, we'll put that, building, connectivity,
Isn't, okay, now that stuff,
Lights.
isn't that like that, the other group that's meeting?
Yeah, but
Does
these
that
are
go
all.
with-
so David
these
was,
are all the-
so,
we're trying to
so
justify.
keep it more simple.
Yeah, so you'll have to
Yeah.
back into those because you're
Yeah.
dealing with activities versus curriculum.
Right,
And,
so talk about the curriculum within the activities.
I mean, if we're going to have the multimedia there, and if we
Right.
have a Great Falls TV presence there, we might be able to have another funding source. I don't know if that's possible, but
Yeah.
A lot of the schools counted on help.
Like Spectrum did in one building, or Time Warner did
Yeah.
something.
Yeah, Time Warner does.
David, what I was trying to kind of avoid is to have heavy debate about this, because I didn't want it to get into city council versus school committee. You know what I mean? I'm trying to design it in a way that we're talking, we're collaborating, but not feeling defensive, or that, do you know what I'm saying?
yeah, but if you're trying to get those things to be part of your building, then you need to have the curriculum statements or whatever it is that supports them to be there,
Okay,
right?
yeah.
That's the way I understand it.
Exactly.
It does.
That's what the ed spec does.
And so a lot of the things that you're
So
rattling
I think,
off are
I
in the
think the
design
important,
patterns right
the
here.
important thing to do is, as David has said,
Yeah.
is you've got to say, we're looking for the second gym.
Right.
Where in the ed specs does
Would
it,
you find that?
does it tell us that that's what we're looking for? If we want a larger auditorium, where in the ed specs is that specified, or where is that described? So that we can go from here to this document and say, this is what the ed specs are written, how they are written in order to support that need. If we want a turf field, or we want this field, where in the ed specs does it state that?
Where does it in the ed specs say that we need to have science labs that are new?
It Yeah, exactly. Just make
That-
those
Right,
connections.
that's the exact connection of,
I hear you about the performing arts, I hear you about the turf field, I hear you.
I was
but-
working back to that.
But, you were working backwards, okay. But where does it say that the science labs need to be?
It's there.
Yeah, it is there.
I know,
But that's
I
the
read
question,
it.
but that's the question.
That's the
And
question,
then
where?
Page
interde-
40.
Interdisciplinary.
Right. I will go and make the connections to these spaces in the ed spec.
That's what
It is
needs
on
to
page
happen.
40.
That's
It
what
is,
tomorrow,
yeah.
that's what tomorrow night needs to be.
Right. That's what you're saying, David.
40,
Well,
41,
that your
43,
gym
49.
And it
has-
does, it says
Your
why we
phys ed
need, why
program
we need
is
them.
pretty demanding about different programs that another gym could be justified. You just need to.
So I'm gonna
state it.
cite
Looking to see
where
what
in
it
the
says.
ed spec you would find these items.
That's correct.
Okay,
For example.
for examples, yeah.
Science labs page.
Yes,
How the
here,
ed,
your hand is up?
My hand is up.
Very,
My hand is up.
Yes.
Mrs. Grondin.
yes.
So you up for a question, or are you up for a vote?
So on this,
He's
on
raising
this, okay,
Yes,
page,
yeah.
you have a list of items here. I would move those to the front, but you have full range of services provided to the community such as daycare, preschool, library, health, and social service. This is near the end of the document.
yeah,
It's in that
It
question.
lists them.
Right.
Accessible recreational
Right.
spaces,
Yeah.
student-run restaurant, performing arts events,
Yeah,
yeah.
art exhibitions, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
A list of those kind of items following up on what Counselor Young
yeah,
just said.
I'm gonna note that.
To make people sort of drool that we can have these things.
Page 19.
This is really what we're talking about.
Right.
I have
Yeah.
that. Yep.
So one thing that I was wondering, when you look at the guiding principles that we've listed out, and you have this nice chart here listed on page 19, I think. I just wonder, what do these design patterns mean to you? When we say these are our guiding principles, and then you tick a box underneath a design pattern, what exactly does that mean?
Yeah, I mean, and that's what, we've talked about the fact that we'll actually include a definition of those, so it's very clear to everyone, because the idea, go ahead.
I'm
Katie.
wondering, Brandy, maybe we take this and make it its own handout? Like
Yes.
if we took this
Yes.
and made its own handout, you could speak
Sure.
to that handout.
Absolutely.
Rather than it gets kind of lost.
Yep.
This is what you're using to design the building, you're saying, these are the
North
patterns
Berwick
that
got
we're
two
gonna
gyms.
use.
Yeah, we're using this full
North
page
Berwick
to
got two
define the
gyms.
whole.
How did they justify that? Or did they, was it on the?
Well, Sanford has two gyms, and we have their ed specs that we've read.
So did Hampton.
Oh, copy theirs.
And Hampton, same thing.
Exactly.
Same thing. That's what you're doing.
This is a public meeting, maybe
Just
there
change the
wasn't.
title.
And,
No plagiarizing.
I mean, are regular people going to be here too?
When?
Right.
Tomorrow night, I guess, or is it just?
It's open, it's open.
Because sometimes all these initials, I mean, I had to ask what they meant,
Exactly.
so I just think we should explain
We'll
what
define
Correct,
everything.
we'll,
he is and
Yes.
Steve.
The workshop.
They're getting this entire document?
They've already received.
Already
that
received it.
document.
They did not receive the one that you received tonight.
Right. They haven't got the edited one.
We need to sell the
Did
state
they
on
get
that,
this
that we need.
updated document?
Exactly what this is.
Because we need it.
Yeah.
Send it,
To the mayor and to the councilors.
okay.
Yeah,
I can do that tonight. I can say following our building committee meeting.
Yeah,
Okay,
with an explanation.
with
maybe.
explanation, okay. All right,
Does that make sense?
yes. Well, this is why I'm asking, that's
Yeah.
feedback.
We're not fighting you on this, we just need.
Oh, no,
be able to
this
sell
was
it.
very helpful. I
Yes.
mean, I only think of, this was excellent.
Actually, David, it was refreshing.
Yeah, no, it was helpful, that's why, remember I said we were practicing? So that you could give me feedback on what to do, how to do it differently, that's why, yeah. I wanted to meet your needs.
I could see the teacher in you tonight.
Thank you for letting us being part of the process.
Absolutely.
So, do we need building committee members there tomorrow night?
I'll be there.
They should be there, if they can be there.
Yeah.
What time?
6 o'clock.
We
I'll
don't
be
ever
here.
have supper. We just.
I know. Yeah, I'll be here.
Okay, so
My husband
we'll
has to work
rework
tomorrow
it.
night, so unless I
We
can
will,
drag a 3-year-old and a 4-year-old.
send these out
I did
tonight.
want to be a professional baby.
You, I, Mark, and Lisa are gonna meet after this.
to help kind of organize this.
Yes.
Yeah,
You're gonna have an
Yeah.
agenda.
Yeah, yeah,
yep.
I'm gonna lay it out.
So is there, we have a regular scheduled meeting tomorrow night for hiring
Yeah,
primarily, right?
that's 3 minutes. Yeah,
And then we're going into workshop?
right.
Yeah. That's right, it's not a joint meeting, it's just a workshop.
Yes.
So then we're going into workshop. And will there be audience participation?
If I allow it,
Yes, if you allow it.
if I allow it.
Jesus.
There's no public participation on the agenda.
No,
Okay.
it's a workshop, but we'll see where it goes.
And it's your meeting with the mayor next
It's
year?
going to be my meeting.
So where's the council come in?
We all sit around together, and they'll ask questions and be presented this, right? Right?
Yeah.
And they will have feedback. They will be able to ask questions, get the answers, have a discussion, but the discussion won't be on PBS, performance-based
No,
PBL.
No, it's just on
Because that's not.
what we need to accomplish.
I would not use PBL
Yes, I agree.
and just say proficiency-based learning, because it gets confused with project-based learning,
Yes,
as we heard.
right,
It's
right, right,
completely different.
Right,
Yeah.
right. True,
A lot of the confusion comes around the same acronym for both of those items.
right. So then, that's what will happen tomorrow night, and then we'll get the council's feedback, who represents the citizens just like we do. We represent the students, they represent the citizens on it. And then we'll get feedback, and then,
It'll be redraft.
and it'll be redrafted again.
Right.
And presented to
School committee?
school committee later on in the month of August.
Right.
And if people say, well, how come I didn't get an opportunity to look at this and vote on it? They do before.
Between now and the school
with
committee.
With the up and down, with the straw.
Not on this.
Not this.
Not on this.
Site, just on the site.
That's on the site.
Just on the site.
Once we give this to the architects at design school, we're not gonna look at it
Right,
again.
again.
We'll look at it, but.
Yeah.
We'll use it to design the building.
Well, it's
Yeah,
almost
yeah.
like what,
No, it's not anything, once we pass it along, it's not gonna be something the school department's using to drive its work.
Right.
no, but it's, I'm kind of thinking of this like a wish list, okay? Of items that you'd like to see included in this new high school. And then later on in the process, you're gonna have to potentially narrow it
Trim it.
down.
You're gonna have to trim it.
Because there won't be enough funding to
Funding
be
to
able
do
to
it.
do everything that people want to do.
Correct.
Well, some of it, the state will say, yes, you can do it, but it's gonna be this big. You want it bigger.
Right.
You
And
wanna,
you'll pay for
what, like
There's a
McDonald's, you
formula.
wanna upsize,
Yeah.
it's gonna be extra.
That's right.
Right.
You have to make people excited.
Because we don't know if the price tag might be something the city will say, yes, we're gonna bond for that.
See, I think part of the, this is my own interpretation, I think part of the problem is some people, myself included, were thinking that when the ed specifications were decided upon by the school committee, that was maybe not the final say, but
That all that would
Have a
go into the high
significant-
school without, oh,
impact on
I see what
whatever
you're saying.
happens.
Yeah.
That's why I was so concerned about the time frame.
Okay, so that's,
And people feeling like the process was being squeezed.
No, the
Hear what I-
process
hear what I'm
is,
saying?
is gonna continue down the road.
Right.
yeah, yeah.
So now that I know that, makes me feel much better, and I suspect that other people feel the same way.
Does it make you feel all better? Not just, I just want you to feel
What degree
all
of better do you feel?
All better?
All better.
Yeah, that's an excellent, yeah, nothing is being cast in stone in terms of the,
Process.
it's saying, this is our wishes, as you
Yeah,
said.
Wish list.
Well, there'd be an opportunity to add some more to it then, right?
Yeah,
possible, yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely.
Because we really haven't heard what the community
I
really
mean,
would like.
we should add to this landscaping, they
Yeah.
said is minimal. State pays for minimal landscaping.
Right.
Should assume the state pays for no landscape.
Furniture.
Essentially.
No furniture.
Throw grass
Well,
in
yes,
and
they,
maybe.
they have a
Furniture
certain
they do.
amount for furniture,
Yeah.
but almost less for landscaping.
Yeah.
We can get some little plaques that people donate,
A tree.
Absolutely.
I, brick,
Yep.
whatever.
Okay, this is very
right, yeah.
helpful, and we have work to do.
All right. I'll call
Thank
this,
you, everybody.
meeting to a close. Thank you very much.
Great.